Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Information and Knowledge Context on the Go. My name is Matt Caton, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. We've got a lot of information to share with you today, so let's go ahead and get started. I have a brain on my screen right now that I'm sharing, and this is really an outline of the information that we are going to be covering this afternoon. This is just a sample brain that I'm happy to share. If anyone has any interest in a copy of this brain, we can certainly archive it and send it your way or make it available to download. But we're really talking about information on the go today. And in so many scenarios, we're sharing and demoing the brain and talking about how the brain can be used for different professions or in different environments. And today, we're really focusing on how to use the brain within your mobile environment, out there in the world, wherever you may be, all the different ways that you have access to your brain, not only to create content and visualize it, but also to access that information, regardless of where you happen to be. And so the information strategy, getting information to users, you collecting your information. There are many different types of data that are important to you, whether it is web content, files, notes, graphics, videos, all different types of content can come into your brain. So we're going to be talking first and foremost about data importing and capturing. How do we get information into the brain? And there are many, many different ways. In fact, I won't be able to cover them all, but I'm going to give you the highlights and talk about some of the most popular ways of getting content into your brain. And of course, visualizing that information, creating meaningful categories. We know that there are many different ways to capture data. People have note-taking apps, people have email, people have their favorite bookmarks and favorites in their web browsers. But the brain stores information and relates that information in context back to you. And there's never any duplication of data. Information can be linked to other related components, related topics, related people. And I'll be sharing that information as well in today's webinar. And finally, we'll also talk about how you can share your data with other users. So not only you accessing your information, but other people accessing your valuable information. Sometimes you're creating a data set, whether you're working on a project or a new product or just an idea that you want to share with friends and colleagues. There's many different ways to export your data from the brain or share your brain data with other users. And finally, visualizing your work process. Something you can't really do with a typical file and folder type of structure. You've got folders all over the place in many different areas, but how is folder A on your C drive related in any way to folder Z on your X drive? There may be some relationships there, and a file folder system has no way of displaying that data. So we're going to be talking about visualizing your data in the many different formats that you can within the brain. And that brings me to my next topic that we like to call the modality of usage. So it's sort of the harmony of accessing your data. And once again, there are many different ways to get to the data that you create within the brain. And the first one I want to talk about today is basically disconnected mode. You're not online. Maybe you're not online because you're in a closed environment. We've got a lot of secure companies that use the brain for data within their own environment. It's not being synced to the cloud. They have no internet access in some scenarios. Even those of us that do have internet access, we find ways to lose that connection from time to time. Whether we're in a taxi or a coffee shop, or camping for the weekend, or we're 2,000 feet in the air flying, coast to coast. The time does come when you lose internet access, or you simply cannot have internet access. And of course, I'm talking about many different examples, whether you're a field rep Here, quite literally, you're out in the field. You're visiting a remote client or looking at equipment in a remote area, and you need to take some notes on that information. And I have some very, very specific examples that I'll share with you when I find myself in that specific scenario. Foreign service, we're traveling overseas. We can't guarantee that we have access where we're traveling to, or where your colleagues, the remote members of your team, it might not be you that's offline, it's other remote members, and they won't be back online for another week or so, and you'll need access to all the notes they took while they were away. And here, of course, are our frequent flyers category. You know who you are, and you need access to your data. You're on your way to a new client. You want to review that presentation. And if you don't have access to it, if it's in the cloud, if it's on your network, and you get on the airplane and they make that announcement, sorry folks, no internet service today, you're kind of stuck. And TheBrain has many, many different options for you. And of course, military. We speak to a lot of military members, either locally or overseas, quite often at TheBrain. And TheBrain is a fantastic tool to use offline to capture that data and share only internally within a closed private network. And then finally, what we like to call plug and chug. And plug and chug is those weekend warriors that, once again, you're just on the road, you're in a coffee shop, you're at your kid's soccer game, or you're in your backyard with your laptop a little bit too far away from your home Wi-Fi, and you need to capture some data. So once again, these disconnected modes that TheBrain offer are great ways to get information into the brain and then share it throughout your different devices that you're accessing it later. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And of course, the online access, we've got all of our platforms that we have, which we'll talk about in just a moment, have the ability to sync to the TheBrain cloud for online access. But sometimes we find ourselves on what I call no specific device. In other words, it's not your laptop. You're visiting a colleague, you're maybe just at their workstation and you need to pull up a spreadsheet really quickly. Where is that spreadsheet? It's in your brain, but you sync your brain to the cloud. So you've got online access to your brain that you can access from anyone else's device, a client, a colleague, from your spouse's or your kid's machine. You need to get to that file. Online access is a great option. And mobile devices, for that, I'm actually going to jump into all devices. And these are actually my devices that I use. I'm here in my office today, so I am on my work desktop. When I head home tonight, I'll be at my home office. Also, on the weekends or when I'm traveling, I've got my travel laptop. I need my data on all three of these different devices. Sometimes these devices are not online, as we talked about earlier. Usually they are, but regardless, I need an accurate reflection. All of my data in context displayed for me on all three devices. And that's not it. It doesn't stop there. I've got an iPhone and an iPad that I log into. And even from time to time, I'm on my old Android device. My Nexus tablet is sometimes just a great tool for me to use because it's not my iPhone, which I absolutely depend on. So the Nexus tablet is something that I take camping or to a kid's soccer game or a baseball game, where if it falls down in the bleachers, it's not the end of the world. It's a pretty rugged little device that I've had for many years, and all of my brains are accessible on that device as well. So this is a great overview of many of the topics that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to talk about these in a sample brain that you can download from our website. If you go to thebrain.com/apps, APPS, or if you do a little search for our applications page, there's some great videos there, 1-hour videos, much like today. Today's video will be there soon as well. And there's some great brain samples that you can actually download, or brain templates. So you can download, this brain I believe is called One Brain for Everything. On the recording of today's webinar, I'll make sure that this brain is there. So you can download, if you're new to TheBrain, You can download some sample brains just to sort of get familiar with the technology, kick the tires, play around with creating or deleting thoughts, or maybe even find a brain that very, very specifically fits your needs, creative writing, or the brain for accounting or people networks. We've got many different sample brains out there where you can just change the content to fit your environment. And this is one of those brains, just a very large general brain that I'll use to talk about as our first topic, information capture, knowledge capture. So we're going to review the basics of getting data into the brain and talk about a couple of even more advanced features that quickly capture information for that knowledge, context on the go. So very, very briefly, for those of you that are new to the brain, I just want to share with you that pieces of information in the brain are what we call thoughts. And so anytime I click on a thought, it brings that thought into the center of the screen and displays all related information around it. And if you stand by just one moment, I just want to check in, make sure that before I get going too quickly, yes, that everyone can see my screen and hear me okay. So pieces of information are called thoughts, and a thought can be associated with any type of content, any type of really digital content, whether it's a note or some type of file, a web link, etc. So notice that anytime I click on a thought, if I click on my work, brings that thought into the center of the screen and displays all related information around it. And we always call that the active thought. We have the active thought in the very center of the brain, and down below we have all of its subcategories, and we refer to those as child thoughts. So my work was a child thought of my brain, and I can just simply click down into my work, then into a client, etc., until I find the specific piece of information I'm looking for. So we have the active thought, the child thoughts down below. Above the active thought, we have the parent thought. So parent, active, and child thoughts. And then finally, over on the right, these are sibling thoughts. Sibling thoughts share one or more of the same parent thought. We'll talk about those in just a moment, having multiple parent thoughts. Or we can have a jump thought. And a jump thought is something that's related to the active thought, but doesn't necessarily fit into any type of hierarchical structure. A very common question that we receive at TheBrain Technologies is, when should I attach something as a jump thought versus as a child thought? And it's very important to point out that there's no right or wrong scenario there. You notice I can actually click on a jump thought and bring that down below to make that a child thought. If I ever want to restructure my brain, I can unlink thoughts, I can delete them. Or I can just simply rearrange them, connect them into different areas. Maybe I want my team to be the parent thought up above. But in this case, I've got my company goals and my team members as jump thoughts off of my work. Down below, I've got all my departments and clients and projects that I'm working on. But the actual goals and team, I just want those to stand out a little bit. So I simply choose to link those as a jump thought there. And now let's go ahead and start creating some content in the brain as well. So I'm going to jump here under marketing. Let's say I've got a new 2019 marketing campaign that I'm putting together for my company. So I'm going to click and drag off of the gate. And that's a really easy way to create a new thought in the brain. So I've got a new marketing campaign for 2019. So I just simply create my new thought. Notice that there's no enter button or extra buttons to click when you're creating a new thought. You simply type in the new name and hit enter. If I didn't like what I was typing in, I can click escape to escape out of that new thought that I'm creating. And at any time, you can alt click or just click on the current active thought to modify its properties. So I can modify the properties of any thought, whether it's renaming the thought, or you'll notice that many of my thoughts have actual icons, marketing trends, market targets. You noticed in my other brain that I was sharing with you earlier, I had zoomable icons. So I can click on this little square to the left to select a stock icon, to capture an image. That's how I got those zoomable icons for images I found online. or choose an existing file, whether it's a GIF or a JPEG or a PNG file that I have. I can choose an image, a custom image for every thought in the brain, just to add that extra context for a nice visualization of the content that for the thought that I happen to be on. So for this, I'll select one of my stock icons. The brain has over 1,500 icons. And this is marketing, so automatically, I've got many different sort of topics to choose from, but there I can see a little rocket ship, and that works great for my new marketing campaign. So I've created my new thought, and now it's time to start adding some content. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a note. And the notes, I always like to, whenever I'm demoing the brain, to share with anyone that the notes are really one of my favorite features of the brain application. Each individual thought that you create has its own unique notes tab. Many of our users out there, the brain users, actually think of the brain, they go a little bit beyond information management or mind mapping, and they refer to the brain as a note-taking app, just because the feature is personally, I think, pretty spectacular. And the notes are designed for, just like our topic is today, easy, quick capture of information in context and on the go. So the notes are where I quickly go to just jot down an idea or an outline for a project that I'm working on. I always also remind users, brain users, that the notes are not intended to design your next, your wedding invitation, or to have complex tables for calculating monthly sales reports. If you're getting into more complex layout, you're going beyond the capabilities of notes, and that's when it's time to add a file attachment, an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, maybe it's even for graphics, a PSD file, Photoshop document, etc. So any type of digital file can be associated with a thought in the brain, and it's really up to you to decide, well, this information can be housed in the notes, or actually want to add a file attachment of a certain file type to this thought. So quick, easy capture of information, my 2000 marketing campaign, ideas to discuss at the next team meeting. And I'll just make a quick little checklist. Well, first, before we have a team meeting, I need to schedule the meeting. The regular meetings, I'll say, regular meetings, brainstorming, and we want to talk about adding clients, or client feedback, and we're going to research, we'll say web designs, or sort of the announcement of our new marketing campaign. Research web designs, and I'll research using social media. So notice that the brain does have spell check, thank goodness. I love spell checks. I can always go back and fix that. In fact, I rely maybe a little too heavily on that. And of course, when something is completed here in my notes, I can simply check that off the list. So love the check boxes, and the notes are really, really great for these quick capture ideas that I can refer back to at a later date. So let's move now beyond the notes and start adding some different types of content into the brain. And again, information, context on the go, you're in a hurry, you've got existing data that you need to bring into the brain. One of your greatest options is simply drag and drop. So let's take a moment to talk about drag and drop into the brain. Now, I've got a directory of some information that persists or is related to this marketing campaign that we're going to be putting together. So I've got a user guide that we're going to use for our new products that we have, and I simply can drag and drop this Word document right here into the brain. And let's take a close look at what just happened. I simply drag and dropped, in this case, a Word doc into the brain. It created a new child thought. That child thought's name is the file name, user guide V02, and it actually has an internal attachment, which is a copy of that Word document. Now that's the default for dragging and dropping into the brain. There are also keyboard shortcuts that you can use, or you can go into the brain's properties and change the behavior of the application. So you can change what happens during drag and drop. And that's a very important setting that I often share with people that are just getting started with the brain. Click on Options and open up Preferences. Now, if you're on a Mac, you would click on TheBrain Preferences. And there are many options here. I won't be able to cover all of these today, but most importantly, on the Behavior tab, you can specify what you want to happen to the file when you drag and drop into the brain. If you're on a network and you've got access to the Z drive, I think I mentioned earlier, and other colleagues on your network have access to the Z drive, and they're updating files in that location. And you need access to those files, to that data. Maybe a shortcut is the best option for you. So you're not moving those files internally into the brain, you just have a shortcut that points to that file on your Z drive. So you would change your setting to link to files. So when you drag and drop, you're just preserving the path to the file, not actually moving a copy or moving the file into the brain itself. Personally, I am one of those users I described earlier that often works offline on the brain. So I like to move files into the brain. So I drag and drop, the file no longer exists in its location, you can move that file into the brain. I'm going to keep the default setting of copy on and show you that you can also utilize some keystrokes. So I'm in a quick hurry and I need to get this sample import. So a component of our user guide talks about importing data. So I want to bring this into this area of the brain as well. So I'm going to click and drag. And if I hold down the Shift key, I'll actually move that file. So there you can see I've got a couple of keyboard shortcuts that, again, you, the user, can customize so that you can change the behavior of drag and drop into the brain. There I just moved that file into the brain. And have no fear, you can always go back and right-click on an attachment. In this case, it's an internal attachment. I can move this file or copy this file out of the brain. If it was a shortcut that I brought in, I can move or copy that file into the brain. Now, something to keep in mind, since we're going to be talking about offline access to the brain for a moment, or in a moment, anytime you bring a shortcut into the brain, if you're offline and you're not connected to wherever that shortcut is pointing, that Z drive is no longer accessible to your operating system. What happens when you try to launch that shortcut on the brain? It's simply going to, you're familiar with it, most likely you'll see a file could not be found. So you'll still preserve the path to that file, but you won't be able to open it unless the operating system you're on has access to that location. So keep that in mind when you're building your brain. If you know you're going to be offline quite a bit, it's best to copy or move data into the brain. The choice is completely yours. So there I've brought a lot of data into just a couple of different file types into my brain. And I also want to bring some web content into the brain. I talked about researching a new web design, or social media. So I'll create a thought for social media ideas. And I've got some web pages that I have found that I really like that I simply want to bring into the brain. So here's my first web page. And I don't have time to read through this and learn the 13 smart tips for supercharging your social media marketing strategy right now, but hey, this is on point. This is exactly what I want to read. The document was last updated October 19th. This is perfect. I need to read through this file. I'll have some time this weekend. So I'm simply going to drag and drop from the address bar in my browser right into the brain. So I drag and drop. I left a little sliver of my brain open there, so I can drop it in. And notice that the brain actually renames the thought. It's actually going to pick up whatever it finds in the title tag of the web page. So it names this Improve Your Strategy. And the brain loads this web page up right there in the brain's built-in browser. So pop-up ads and all, sadly. So that webpage had a pop-up ad. I just closed it. But there's the article. And now when I've got some time this weekend, I can read through that information. So drag and drop files into the brain, drag and drop web pages into the brain. Let's take a moment now to talk about a feature that I really want to highlight on today's webinar, and that is called BrainBox. We're talking about information capture on the go. That means you are busy. You don't always have time to sit and finesse your data the way that you want to. You want to capture a bunch of information and maybe organize it later. And a feature that is fairly new to the brain that will help you facilitate that process is BrainBox. The BrainBox is a way to capture web pages or even files and data, throw it into what we call the BrainBox for organizing at a later date. And first, let me show you where the BrainBox is in the Brain application. So the Brain has a tabbed interface. I've got two brains open right now. The demo brain that I started today with, the information on the go, so I can click on that tab to launch that brain. Here is my brain that I'm demoing now. There's a little plus sign with a circle here. This opens up my full brain list. So these are all of the different brains that I have. I know that sentence sounds a little crazy. I should say the brain databases that I have. So I've got a lot of different brain databases on different topics, brains that I'm sharing with other brain users or colleagues, or brains that I demo from time to time. But this is the full list, excuse me. And I can click on any one of those to launch that brain in a new tab. But we're talking about the BrainBox. And so if I scroll just a little further, you see right next to my avatar, the little icon of a box with the brain logo on it, and that is my BrainBox. So these are all of the different files or web pages that I've thrown into my BrainBox to be properly categorized at a later date. So talk about quick capture information. It should be called instant capture. As soon as I see something I like, I can send it to my BrainBox and then figure out where I want it to go later. So I've got another social media page that I stumbled upon. Close that pop-up. So here's another page that looks very friendly, very interesting. It's got some great tips on how to be consistent in your social media, graphic sizes, etc. that can be used. A lot of helpful information here. Now remember, not too long ago, about 20 seconds ago, I changed my brain. So I don't have my brain open right now, where, I mean, it's right here in another tab, but I'm a busy guy. I don't have time to go finding that brain, finding the location in that brain where I want this link to reside. I just want to send this web page over to my brain, and this weekend when I've got that spare time that I'm looking for, I'll categorize this information. So I'm going to use the BrainBox. And the BrainBox is a nice little add-on that can be added to your default browser. I'll take you in a moment to our webpage where we've got more information about how to set up BrainBox in your particular browser. Sometimes it gets set up as, I think they call it a bookmarklet. For Chrome, it's an extension. And so you can do a search for Chrome extensions, do a search for BrainBox, you can find it that way, or you can find it on our website with further instructions. But I've already set it up. There's my BrainBox button. So this means at any point and any time when I'm browsing here in Chrome, I've got my BrainBox button. I see something I like, I can just click and add that into my BrainBox. So that will be waiting for me once I return back to my brain. You can see it'll show up at the top of the list. The last thought that I added was this Major League Baseball standings. That's going to go in my baseball brain that I keep. But in a moment, auto sync will kick in, and there, I actually just clicked on the button. No syncs to happen here, but it'll sync in the background with BrainBox. And that item, there it is. It just showed up. Social media marketing tips for every platform. So now I've got it in my BrainBox, and now let's fast forward to the weekend. I've got that extra time. I can browse, find the brain that I'm looking for. Here it is. I'm in my social media. Oh, I found that web link for social media tips on any device. and that's in my brain box. So I click on brain box. I can hover over the thought, or the item, I should say, in brain box. And with these icons, I can either create a new child thought, which is what I want to do. Paperclip will add it to the existing thought. I can preview it, so it'll launch this in my favorite browser. And of course, I can delete, move, etc. So a lot of other features available. So I'll just click on the plus tab, and I'm actually taking that item out of my brain box, and now I've added it here as a new child thought in this area of my brain. That's the brain box from the cloud. There's also a brain box from your desktop for files and documents. Now it's a little bit different. I can't switch over really quickly from Windows to PC. I'm on a Windows machine today, so I'll show you the Windows methodology for adding content into your brain box. Here are a few more files, and this review PDF is something that I need to do. This is actually a staff review. So this has nothing to do with the current thought that I'm in, maybe not even the current brain that I have open, but I do need to send this document, or a copy of this document, into my brain box. So for a file, I right-click on a Windows machine, I right-click and select Send to Brain Box. There's no added installation that needs to take place for this to work. As soon as you install the Brain 10, your brain box will be installed in your OS, your operating system. So for any file, I can say, yep, I want to send this over to my brain box. And remember, my brain is set to copy data into the brain, so it doesn't move that file. It just sent a copy, and there it actually showed up in the background. Sent a copy over into my brain box, so now I can find the right thought, and again, add that piece of information. For a Mac machine, the only difference is the brain does need to be open. You need to have the brain open and logged in, and therefore the brain will be showing up in that tray down below. Sorry, not tray, dock. So on a Windows machine, this little pop-up toolbar down below is called the dock. You'll see your brain logo, there it is, and you can simply click and drag and drop it onto, now on a Windows machine, all that does is activate the application. But on a Mac, it won't activate the application, but if I release, it's going to send this file into my Mac OS brain box. And the brain box is synced with your account, so I have access to my brain box on any other device. Let's say I just want to drop that document here. I can just, since I already did the drag and drop, I'll just drop it right there. So that is how you get brain box information into the brain. There's another key feature that I think is important for today's topic, because sometimes you know of information that you need in an area of your brain, but you haven't found it yet. So we're sort of reverse engineering right now. I don't have this data that I need to send into my brain. I'm in my brain and I need to go out and find some data. So social marketing on every platform, I know specifically from experience that icons on Twitter, some sizes look great, some sizes look terrible. It'll cut it off top and bottom or side to side, or it zooms in and you just see the center part, and your icon on your Twitter feed looks absolutely awful. So I need to research that. What's the right size that's cross-platform? Sometimes it looks good on my phone and then I look at it online and it looks terrible, or vice versa. So Twitter icon size. That is what I need to figure out. I don't have that information. I don't own it. What am I going to do? Well, the typical answer these days, you're going to Google it. You're going to find it online, obviously. That information exists online. I don't even need to leave the brain. I can click on F4, or I can go up to Edit, Search Web, I believe it's under, but F4 is my shortcut. And what F4 does is it brings up the web search feature. It might not be under options. Sorry, let me just check so I don't give you the wrong information. Online, Think Brain. There it is, web search. Yeah, it's under options. So I like to use the keyboard, F4, but it is going to search the web for whatever the current active thought is. So you can start creating content, creating ideas, brainstorming in the brain. What is the proper Twitter size? Let's have the web tell us. Notice that my search engine comes up to Bing. You can modify this to even edit and add your own search engine if you want to be able to search. Well, eBay is already there, but some other platform or web site that you search from time to time. You can add that in. I search Bing, so I make that my default. I click on search, and it just makes information discovery so rapid, so fast. Context on the go. I search search sizes. There's the answer for me right there, front and center. The official size is 1500 by 500. I actually never knew that. And that was as of August 23rd. So I'm going to copy that, and right here, Twitter icon size, cut and paste. So I'm just going to paste that right into TheBrain. So I always have that information accessible when I'm putting my searches together. I can search in TheBrain. TheBrain is a fantastic built-in search. So I just type in a few letters. Twitter, obviously there it comes up in the notes and the thought name itself, Twitter icon size, and I'll be able to go directly to that thought. Everything that's going into your brain is being indexed, whether it's the thought names, the notes, even the file attachments, and whether it's a shortcut or an internal attachment. All is indexed by your operating system and therefore searchable from within the brain. So that brings me to, I've got to jump ahead now to importing. We talked about importing into the brain as well. So context on the go. You quickly want to bring an entire folder structure into the brain that you've already created, or you've got an outline of a document. This is one of those scenarios where I won't have time to share each individual option that's available for importing into the brain. So I'm going to pick one, and the most common one I think is files and folders. Someone has an existing file and folder structure that they want to bring into the brain, and it's a really, really simple process. But it's important to know sort of the guidelines, what the brain is looking for. So here under my marketing campaign, I've got, actually I don't need to create the new thought because I think the folder will be the thought name itself. So let's open up my marketing directory, and there it is. I've got this folder called Ad 21. So just a simple ad with some information. I've got the launch parties, the research, our expenses, and I just want to bring this content into the brain really quickly. So it doesn't matter the folder type or the folder content. I just want to share that this has subfolders. So even if I go into research, there's some folders. There's another folder called development, expenses. I've got some documents there as well. And this is all in this Ad 21 folder. I want to visualize that folder here in the brain. I want to import it into the brain. So first step one is navigate to the desired thought. I want Ad 21 to be a child thought of my 2019 marketing campaign because it's a component of this marketing campaign. So it's always, whatever you're importing is going to attach itself to your current active thought. Keep that in mind. In a file and folder structure, folders become thoughts and files become attachments to those, to all those thoughts. So if I click on File and select Import, and here, of course, are just a quick visual of the other import types that you can do. If you do want to know specifics about importing a FreeMind file or importing a BRZ or a BrainZip from the Brain 8 or earlier versions of the Brain, send a note into support@thebrain.com, and we're happy to explain any questions that you may have. Text outline is a really great one too. You can have an outline of a document properly formatted, and you can import that content into the brain. But let's go ahead and import a folder, and I'll select folder and navigate onto my, let's see here. There it is, desktop 2, and into marketing and Ad 21. So I'm highlighting Ad 21, and I'll say OK. And I selected on purpose a fairly small file, or folder with small file content, just so everything goes really quickly. Yes, I've imported directories in the past, whether it's from a client or a customer or a colleague, a very large folder. They can be imported in, and they'll take a little bit more time. And you'll see a progress window here happening as it's going. But I'm going to click on import, and this is going to go really quickly. There you can see it's updating, and it's all done. Aha, I even made a mistake. I imported into a new brain. There was a radio button to import into the existing brain or into a new brain. I actually created a new brain with that content. So I'm going to hit cancel and do this again. File, import, and brain folder is what I want to import. And here's that radio button that I missed. So I meant to share that with you too. So, and I'll select the folder, desktop 2, and in my marketing directory, there is add 21. I'll say OK, and import. So it says it's not undoable. It actually is. You can hit edit undo. So edit undo. But this undo is only available for a short time until auto-sync kicks in. Once your brain syncs to the cloud, and this brain is auto-syncing in the background, it sort of clears that undo. So if you want to undo it, you've got a limited amount of time, or you can manually go through and start deleting and unlinking thoughts. But add 21, again, that was the folder name, so that becomes the file name, or excuse me, the thought name. And the attachment, there's the PDF, it's preloading in the built-in browser there. Expenses was a subdirectory. Research was a subfolder. Development was a subfolder with its content. So my files are attachments, my folders become thoughts, and now I'm visualizing all of that content into the brain. So that's just one import capability that is available for you. So now that we've created this brain, we've brought information in. We've actually brought in a lot of information in just the past 20 minutes or so. This brain is syncing to the cloud, so I have online access to this brain. Actually, it's not syncing yet. I just clicked on upload. So this is its first sync onto the cloud. I am going to navigate into my cloud account. So you can log into the brain. If you go to thebrain.com, on the very upper right, there is a login button, and clicking on that login button will bring you to your brain list. So these are all of the brains that I have synced to the cloud. We talked earlier about access to your brain from anywhere. You're on a colleague's machine, you're on a friend's desktop. I'm logging in from my wife's laptop, and I really quickly need to look up a client phone number, and I don't have my computer with me. I can go to the web browser and log into the brain, and the brain that I just synced looks like it's still uploading. That's a fairly large brain. So I'm actually going to open the brain that I created for today's webinar, and I think I synced it, and that brain is called information on the go. So here's my list of brains, and there it is, information on the go. So that same brain that I was demoing at the beginning of the call, I can open up that brain from the web interface. So here I am on the web client. So I am in Google Chrome, but I can create new thoughts. I can click and drag. Since I'm logged in with my account, I can say new platform. So I can add a new thought. I can add notes to my thoughts and even add file attachments. So I can upload files or enter URLs. So I can continue on modifying my brain on the go. I don't have access to my laptop, but I can get to my brain through the cloud so I don't lose a beat, and I can continue on adding my information. And then when I return back to my desktop application, and I'll scroll up to information on the go, you can see auto sync actually just kicked in. So there in a moment, I'll have that thought that I added through the web client, have that available to me through the desktop as well. And now we're really going to have some fun. I am going to access this brain from my mobile device as well. So I've got my iPhone. And rather than, here I can log in really quickly. Now, rather than just holding my phone up and trying to show you what I'm seeing on my end, I'm going to try something a little bit new. I'm going to screen mirror. So I've got a code that should pop up. There it is. And I'm not sure which device, which monitor this will show up on. There, it shows up right there on the monitor that I'm sharing. So there's a little bit of lag. You can see I'm already off the screen that's on the desktop right now. So hopefully that catches up really quickly. Otherwise, we won't be able to do it this way. But nonetheless, I have the option of launching my brain. And there, it's slowly catching up. I'm so sorry about the lag. And that's really just connecting from here to there. It's not working as well as I had hoped. But in a moment, you'll see that I have the brain open here on my iPhone. So everything that I've added, and there you can see it's slowly catching up. I'm about to tap on the brain icon. We have an iOS app and an Android app as well. So you can access your brain, and it's, as you can see, it's not this slow. It's rapid fire, so I can launch. Here I'm just navigating. Maybe if you can look in my camera, it goes a lot faster for me. And these are my weekend thoughts. The brain always launches from the last activated thought. So I'm already sort of starting to recreationally, this is my recreational brain, preparing for the weekend. And I've got my weekend checklist available here. And down below, I've got where my notes, file attachments are. The brain box is located down below. There, that screen on, there it is, perfect. So there you can see down below are all of my access to my notes, to my file attachments. I can add new thoughts. I can even view the brain box. There's that brain box icon. Anything that I've sent to the brain through the brain box, when it's in the brain box, I can access that from my mobile devices as well. And send items that I find on my mobile device into the brain box. And here, hopefully this will catch up a little bit quicker, but I'm going to click and open my notes. And you can see that I can continue on adding notes. The last thing in my notes you'll see when they open up is a shopping list. So I've got a Woodman's shopping list, the big grocery store in my neighborhood. And if I want to start in with my shopping list, I can say mayo, return onions, return bread. So just a couple of items to add to the Woodman shopping list. You can see I added those really quickly. It's going a little bit slower there on the screencast. But this is, you know, I always talk about some of my favorite features of the brain being the notes-taking capabilities. I also enjoy the built-in browser, but most importantly, I enjoy being able to access my brain from my iPhone, from my office machine, from my laptop, anywhere I happen to go. I've got access to anything that goes into my brain. And when I return back to the Plex, I can just click on the sync icon, and now that sync is kicking off, and any changes I made, which I did just make on my weekend checklist, sort of grocery shopping list, is now updated to all my devices. I can access that information from my mobile devices as well as my office and home machine and traveling laptop as well. And then the final component, so sorry that I didn't have the wow factor that I was hoping for with the screencasting, just because of the slow response there. So I'll stop mirroring, and hopefully that will, there. Well, it stopped mirroring right away. That happened very quickly. But regardless, hopefully you get the idea of accessing all that information from your mobile device, from your iPhone or Android device. And then finally, we also talked about sharing these brains as well. I'm going to be sharing all of these brains that I've demoed today with you. So everyone that joins today's call will get a link to today's webinar. And on that link, I am going to put this brain that I created, the information on the go. There's not a lot of content here, but it's just a sample brain that you can play around with if you'd like, and a link, more importantly, to this My Brain. I won't have all this marketing campaign 2019, but everything else up above, all of this content, you'll actually be able to load this brain up in your own brain if you'd like, as a sample brain. And the way that I do that is I create what we call a BRZ. So I can click on File for any brain and select Backup to Brain Archive. So this allows me to zip up this entire brain, and it's going to include everything. The thought icons, any notes, any file attachments, web links, etc. All of that content zipped up into a single file that I can email, or in this case, post online for people to download. And there's a couple of options when I'm creating a brain zip. I can keep it password protected. In other words, only my account can extract this brain. So in order to open this brain, once you receive or download a BRZ, is you open the brain and say File, Import, and select BRZ. Now, if I were to leave this radio button checked, unless you're logged in as me, which you won't be, you would not be able to extract this BRZ. So I can extract, or I can save or secure my backups that I make for my personal brains by staying on that default option. In this scenario, anyone can actually download and extract this BRZ. Here, I'll save it onto my desktop, and I'll say backup, and it backs up this entire brain into a single file. It's going to show up right down here on my desktop once it's done. That's a pretty big brain, so it's taking a little while. I should have brain zip or BRZ'd the information. There it is. So you can see in the lower lower left-hand corner of my screen, there's that brain that I just backed up. And by default, when you create a BRZ, a brain archive, it's going to timestamp it, just the current date. So that's really helpful, so you can keep track of. I do weekly backups of my brain just to make sure I've got a secure backup that I keep in a secure location, and they're always automatically timestamped. Just a nice little feature. So that's one way to share a brain. Now, when I send this brain to you, you can open it up, extract it, play around, add your own information. You would not be able to sync it to my account. There's a process to go through. If you would like to know more about, if you want to save that brain, make your own changes, and make that become your brain and sync it to your account, send a note to us at support@thebrain.com. There's a few steps we can share with you to get you to do that. I don't want to confuse anyone right now with that process, especially for just a sample brain. But regardless, that's one option for sharing a brain. Obviously, the other end user needs to have the brain installed in order to extract it. Let's say they don't have the brain. Let's say you've created a fantastic brain for a new project you're working on at the office. It's ready for its world premiere. You're going to share it with your boss and now get that big promotion you've been hoping for. It is time to sync your brain to the cloud and send them the web link. Share this brain online. So as soon as you sync your brain to the cloud, you can go into the online option and select this option for Show Account Info. Or excuse me, I'm sorry, I was about to click on the wrong thing. Brain Access and Sharing, that's where we want to go. And in the Brain Access and Sharing, if you know someone else has a brain account and you want to share this brain specifically with them, you can type their email address in down below. But in my scenario that I just presented, your boss does not use the brain that you know of, and you want them to see this brain very quickly without telling them, okay, first go to thebrain.com, download the installer, create an account, let me know what email address you created your account with, save those steps, and just simply check this box, allow public access. And just because you're saying allow public access doesn't mean that everyone in the world is going to start accessing your brain. Brains that are synced to the cloud are not indexed by the Google juggernaut out there, so they won't show up in search results. Only people that get this URL will have access to this brain. So if you do want to share it with the world, check this allow public access and tweet that link out there. If you want to share it specifically with your business colleagues or your client or your boss, allow public access, copy this link, and send them that link in a URL. So I'm going to copy this link, allow public access. So I copy, and I go to my web browser. I'll go to just a random web page and paste. And since it's publicly accessible, this brain will load up for anyone. Now, I'm logged in right now, and my browser knows I'm logged in, so I can continue making edits. But a non-logged in user, or even someone that's never heard of the brain, never installed it, will see the exact same thing. As a read-only user, visitor to the site, they'll click and drag to create a new thought, and they will not be able to. They've got read-only access with that URL into this brain. Only you, the brain owner or administrator, can access that brain. Now, if you do want to collaborate, your boss really loves it, and they want to add some information, now you're talking about TheBrain. We do offer a product called TheBrain that allows multiple users to sync, to edit the same brain database and keep them all in sync through the Brain Cloud. One step beyond that is TheBrain Server. TheBrain Server allows you to sync through your own server. So you're not syncing through the Brain Cloud, you're syncing through www.myprivatecloud.com. So that's another option as well. And of course, contact us at support@thebrain.com if you'd like to know more about either of those two features. And finally, the last component, we talked at the very, very beginning, so I do want to come full circle and go back to this information on the Go Brain. I'm going to make this brain full screen, and I'm going to minimize the notes. The area that separates the content and the Plex, a couple of buttons over here that I can click on to go, so I can change the view of my brain to go into sort of an over-under mode, side-by-side mode, or I can just scroll my notes out of the way by clicking on this button. So I'm full screen with the Plex. And I talked at the very end about information display and getting the big picture of your information. So I'm actually going to go now into, make my thoughts just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to click to go into Mind Map View. So the brain has many different viewing capabilities. We've got an outline view, which gives you a really linear display of your data. This is Mind Map View. So now you can see I've expanded, and in this scenario, I've expanded the entire brain. And I can get a big picture of all the information that is available in this brain. And I can continue to connect them. If I want to connect, frequent flyers, maybe there's a new platform for frequent flyers, and I want to connect those two thoughts. I can continue on, as you can see, modifying and editing my brain in these views as well. So this is the mind map view. And think about this in the context of if you're putting together sort of the steps of a process or a new project that your team is working on. And you want to sit back and get that sort of high-level overview of how everything is related. What are you missing? What do you have too much of? Are you heavy in one department versus another? This is a really, really great way to visualize all of your data. And these different views are available on the desktop application. So from the desktop, I can go into Outline, Mind Map, or Expanded Views to start seeing sort of the big picture of my digital brain. And with that, that's all the topics that I wanted to cover on today's webinar, information and knowledge context on the go. Excuse me, and with that, I'll see if Jay has any questions for me that are popping up. I see there's quite a few actually, so let me just move this out of the way. The first question that came up, and of course, we're right on top of the hour, we're right on top of the hour, and I realize some people have only a limited time to join today's webinar, so if you are logging off, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to share the many different features that are available in the brain with the brain community. And if you do want to refer back to the recording tomorrow, you can always come back and catch up on any questions that you may have missed. So there's just a few additional questions that came in. The pros and cons of having a big brain versus smaller interconnected brains. Thank you, Jay, for sending that out and whoever posted that question. And that is also a very common question. Do I create one massive brain with all of my digital information or smaller topic-specific brains? Let's talk about the pros of each variety. The pros of one massive brain, all of your data in one brain. And I will have to say that's probably the most popular choice or school of thought that people follow. One brain for all their digital information. The pros, I do one search in my brain, so I do a search for the letter I, and anything that contains a thought, in this case it's just thoughts, so there's a few attachments, But anything that starts with a word with the letter I is showing up in my search results in this fairly small brain. So one place to go to do a search to find information on golf or ice fishing or the latest proposal that you're putting together. Regardless of what you're thinking about, you do a search and you can find that content. That's really the major pro of having everything in one brain. Also, you only have to back up one brain. You only have to keep track of syncing one brain from machine to machine. I am the school of thought, smaller topic-specific brain. The pros for me are that when I demo a brain, I don't have to worry about accidentally clicking on a thought that shows my 2018 tax returns or my investment portfolio or passwords to websites that I work on or my blog or what have you. So I don't have to worry about sensitive information. I keep that information in my brain, but I keep it in a brain that I simply do not open on webinars, shared webinars, or that I won't accidentally share with another colleague if I'm zipping up a brain and sharing ideas. I create brains for projects that I'm working on, whether it's my kids' school or projects at the office or that I'm working on with a client. And so smaller topics, specific brains always work for me. The major brains, I jump in and out of, I would say, 4 specific brains. And as you can see, I keep different wallpaper on all my brains. The wallpaper for me is not just to make the brain look cool. It's actually a unique identifier. I know which brain I'm in depending on the wallpaper. So those of you that have ever sat in on my Brain 101 classes, you've seen for years I've got this just nice picture of the ocean. I love the ocean. I love scuba diving. I love surfing, fishing, blah, blah, blah. So I've got a picture of water as my background. That is my recreational brain. My business brains, I don't open on the webinar. So I won't show you what the background is there. It's sort of this neat, high-tech, futuristic background for those. But regardless, I jump in and out of different topic brains that way. So the choice is completely yours, and this is the most important thing to take away from that. And the cons are the exact reverse. I have to jump into a specific brain to do a search. Large brain people, they can't share their brain because it's got a lot of sensitive information. They need to take some extra steps. But you can take those extra steps. You can take a large brain and segment it into smaller topic-specific brains for sharing. Or I can take smaller topic-specific brains that I have and merge them together. Totally possible, but it just takes a few extra steps, and it's a more advanced feature of the application. And then the next question that came in, speak on BrainBox on the other OS, Mac, Android, iOS, and also how it works to send local files. So I think I did cover that, sending local files to BrainBox. Once again, we right-click on a file. This is on a Windows machine. Right-click, and I can say send to BrainBox. And remember, on a Mac OS, I can take a file and drag it down to the dock with the brain up and running, drag it down to the dock. Now, probably what the question is referring to is maybe I didn't show how to send something into the BrainBox on a mobile device. Well, we saw my mobile device was a little slow. So where's my camera? There I am. So I'm just going to hold my phone up. So here's my iPhone. I'll log in. And let's say I find a website. So I'm just going to open up my web browser. And so here's a common page that I go to. It's my kids' mountain biking team. But let's say I need a link to this website because they do have a lot of helpful information. They update every week. I want to save this web page. I'm in Safari on my iOS device. Down at the bottom of any web page, you're always going to have this share button. Share buttons appear on many different apps. And there's no additional steps on the iPhone. I can just scroll through all the different ways I can share, and there it is. BrainBox. Hopefully you can see that right in the center of the screen. So I want to send this to BrainBox. I've just shared my mountain biking website to my BrainBox. So here I can go back into the Brain. Oops, that's the web version. And back into the Brain and open up my BrainBox. And in a moment, actually once sync kicks in, you'll see my mountain biking link show up there in my BrainBox. So another way you can also get to your BrainBox, this is within a Brain. If I want to add something from the BrainBox into this Brain, great. If I don't even have a Brain open, I'm going to close my Brain tabs. Now mine is, there we go, at the very bottom. Obviously, like I said earlier, I've got a lot of different Brain databases. But just scroll to the bottom of your Brain list, and there's an option to open your BrainBox. So these are all the different items I can click to review. It's going to load up over here in the content window. So here I can sort of review my BrainBox. I can see if I do need something in it, don't need something in it, I can remove it, etc. And if I find something, oh, modern house plan. This is in my sort of house renovation area of a Brain that I have. I can click to open a new Brain tab, find the correct Brain, and add in that home renovation. So many different ways to interface with the BrainBox, adding things into BrainBox or extracting them into the app. So, and from your iOS device, from that same BrainBox button, I can add something into my Brain from my iOS device, and the same is true from Android as well. Add things into your BrainBox or take them out of your BrainBox and into the Brain. And since BrainBox, I did see a lot of questions about BrainBox, so I'll take you, we'll end on this note. I'm going to go back to our website. There it is, there it is. Back to our website, and I'm just going to click on the search and type in BrainBox. So you can do that at the top, or you can, there's an area for, you know, what's new in the Brain 10. And BrainBox is a component of the Brain 10, and so that will take you to the BrainBox page. So there it is, and a couple of different ways on our website to get to this, but you can learn more about the Firefox add-on, the Chrome extension, or adding BrainBox into Safari or Opera, etc., and just more information about BrainBox there. And of course, if you do have further information or further questions, I should say, send a note into support@thebrain.com. And more features of the BrainBox are on the way. We've got really big plans for BrainBox in the future, so it's constantly under development. So look for new and exciting features in BrainBox in the future. So with that, I see that we're about 10 minutes over time now. I want to thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. Again, if you did have a question that Jay wasn't able to get to, send that into support@thebrain.com. Jay, it looks like you had your hands full today. Some really, really great questions. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to join another webinar in the future at any time. They're always announced on the homepage of our site, and today's recording will be announced there tomorrow as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and as always, enjoy your brain.